Vincent Calabrese had always been a joke. Not the kind of joke that made people laugh out loud, but the kind that made them smirk behind their hands, the kind that made seasoned capos shake their heads and mutter under their breath. Vinnie the Rat, they called him. Not because he was clever or cunning, but because he scurried through the shadows of the Moretti Famiglia like a rodent, taking scraps, running errands, and always looking over his shoulder. He was 38 years old, balding prematurely, with a soft belly that hung over his belt and eyes that never quite met yours. He wore cheap suits that didn't fit right, and his hands were always damp, always fidgeting. In a world where respect was currency and silence was law, Vinnie had neither. He was a third-rate soldier in a first-rate organization, and everyone knew it. But Vinnie had dreams. He dreamed of being seen, of being feared, half walking into a room and watching heads turn, not in mockery but in recognition. He dreamed of the kind of power that made men step aside, the kind of wealth that bought loyalty, the kind of presence that commanded silence. And so, when the opportunity came, Vinnie took it. It was a cold Tuesday in March when the shipment came through. The Moretti Famiglia controlled the docks on the east side of the city, a sprawling network of warehouses and loading bays, where cargo containers arrived from overseas, filled with everything from olive oil to something far more valuable. Vinnie had been assigned to watch a particular container that night, a routine task for a nobody like him. Stand in the shadows, make sure no one gets too curious, and report back when the truck leaves. Simple, boring. Beneath him, he thought. But when the truck pulled up and the crew began unloading, Vinnie saw something that made his heart race. One of the crates had been damaged in transit, its corner splintered, revealing stacks of cash wrapped in plastic. 20s, hundreds, thousands of dollars, just sitting there waiting. The crew was careless, laughing and smoking as they hauled the crates into the warehouse. No one was watching the money. No one cared about one damaged crate among dozens. Vinnie's hands trembled as he approached. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. This was his chance. This was the moment that would change everything. He took $20,000. It was almost too easy. He stuffed the bills into a duffel bag he kept in his car, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. He drove home that night barely able to breathe, barely able to think. He had done it. He had actually done it. For 3 days, he waited for the hammer to fall. He expected a knock on his door, a phone call, a visit from one of the enforcers. But nothing came. The Famiglia moved on, business as usual, and Vinnie began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had gotten away with it. And so, on the 4th day, he bought the Cadillac. It was a 1959 Cadillac Eldorado, black as midnight, with chrome that gleamed like polished silver and fins that stretched toward the sky like the wings of some ancient predatory bird. The interior was red leather, pristine and luxurious, and the engine purred like a panther. It was the most beautiful thing Vinnie had ever seen. He paid in cash. The dealer didn't ask questions. Vinnie drove that Cadillac through the city like a king. He parked it outside his favorite diner, outside the social club where the soldiers gathered, outside the apartment building where he lived alone in a one-bedroom walk-up. He polished it every morning, ran his hands over the smooth paint, imagined the looks on their faces when they saw him behind the wheel. And they did look. At first, there were whispers. Where did Vinnie get the money for a car like that? Did he win the lottery? Did someone die and leave him an inheritance? But the whispers were quiet, cautious, because in the Famiglia you didn't ask too many questions. You kept your head down, did your job, and minded your business. But Don Salvatore Moretti was not a man who minded his business. He was a man who knew everything. The Don was 63 years old, a man carved from granite and silence. His hair was silver, slicked back from a face that seemed carved by time and violence. He wore tailored suits that cost more than most men made in a year, and his eyes were the color of winter ice. When he spoke, the room held its breath. When he was silent, the room prayed. He had built the Moretti Famiglia from nothing, brick by bloody brick, favor by favor, body by body. He ruled from a mansion on the hill overlooking the city, a sprawling estate surrounded by iron gates and loyal men. Inside, the walls were lined with paintings of saints and sinners, and the dining room table could seat 20. It was a place of beauty and terror, where weddings were celebrated and betrayals were punished, often in the same night. And Don Salvatore knew about the $20,000. He had known from the beginning. The shipment had been a test, a way to weed out the weak and the greedy. The damaged crate had been deliberate, left unguarded, to see who would take the bait. 3 soldiers had been watching that night, and only one had been stupid enough to steal. Vincent Calabrese, Vinnie the Rat. The Don could have killed him immediately. A bullet in the back of the head, a body dumped in the river, a message sent to anyone else who thought about crossing the Famiglia. It would have been simple, efficient, the way these things were usually handled. But Don Salvatore Moretti was not a simple man. He believed in justice, yes, but he also believed in artistry. A quick death was too merciful for a rat like Vinnie. No, this required something more elegant, more devastating, something that would not only punish the thief, but remind everyone else what happened when you betrayed the Don. And so, he made a plan. It was a Friday evening when the call came. Vinnie was sitting in his apartment, drinking cheap whiskey and admiring his Cadillac through the window when the phone rang. His stomach dropped. No one called him. Ever. He picked up the receiver with a shaking hand. Vinnie. The voice on the other end was smooth, calm, unmistakable. It was Tony Barese, the Don's consigliere, a man who spoke softly but carried the weight of the entire Famiglia in every word. "Yeah, Tony. What's up?" Vinnie tried to sound casual, but his voice cracked. "The Don wants to see you." Vinnie's heart stopped. "The Don? Why? Did I do something wrong?" There was a pause, and Vinnie could almost hear the smile in Tony's voice. "The Don doesn't explain himself, Vinnie. He just said to come to the estate tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Don't be late." The line went dead. Vinnie stared at the phone, his mind racing. This was it. They knew. They had to know. The Don was going to kill him. He thought about running, about getting in the Cadillac and driving as far as he could, but he knew it was pointless. You didn't run from the Moretti Famiglia, you didn't hide. If the Don wanted you dead, you were already a ghost. He barely slept that night. The next evening, Vinnie drove to the estate in the Cadillac, because what else was he going to do? If he was going to die, he might as well die in style. The gates opened as he approached, and he drove up the long, winding driveway, past gardens and fountains, past men in dark suits who watched him with dead eyes. He parked in front of the mansion, his hands slick with sweat, and walked to the door. It opened before he could knock. Tony Barese stood in the doorway, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. "Vinnie, come in." The interior of the mansion was like something out of a dream or a nightmare. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting golden light over marble floors. Paintings of the Virgin Mary and the saints lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow him as he walked. The air smelled of cigars and expensive cologne. Tony led him through a hallway and into a dining room. The table was set for 3. At the head of the table sat Don Salvatore Moretti. Vinnie froze. The Don looked up from his glass of wine, his cold eyes locking onto Vinnie. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied him the way a scientist might study an insect pinned to a board. "Vincent Calabrese," the Don said finally, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Sit." Vinnie sat. The Don took a sip of his wine, then set the glass down with a soft clink. "You bought a car?" Vinnie swallowed. "Yes, Don. A Cadillac. I've been saving up and—" The Don raised a hand, and Vinnie's words died in his throat. "Do you know why I called you here, Vincent?" Vinnie's mouth was dry. "No, Don." The Don smiled. It was not a comforting smile. "I called you here because I am a forgiving man." Vinnie blinked. "Forgiving?" "Yes." The Don leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "You stole from me. $20,000. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought you were clever." Vinnie's blood turned to ice. His vision blurred. He opened his mouth to speak, to deny it, to beg, but no words came. The Don continued, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You are not clever, Vincent. You are a rat. But you are my rat, and I have decided to forgive you." Vinnie's breath came in ragged gasps. "Don, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Quiet." Vinnie shut his mouth. The Don stood, walking slowly around the table until he was standing directly behind Vinnie. Vinnie could feel the man's presence like a cold hand on his neck. "I am going to forgive you, Vincent, because I believe in second chances. But forgiveness comes with a price. Anything, Don. Anything." The Don placed a hand on Vinnie's shoulder, and Vinnie flinched. "Good. Then you will accept my gift." "Gift?" The Don returned to his seat, his smile widening. "I am sending you 2 of my nieces, Lucia and Isabella. They will stay with you for a time. You will care for them, protect them, treat them as honored guests. Do you understand?" Vinnie stared at him, confused. "Your nieces? But Don, I don't—" "Do you understand, Vincent?" "Yes. Yes, Don. I understand." "Good." The Don raised his glass. "They will arrive tomorrow. Welcome them with respect. Disappoint me, and there will be no second chance." Vinnie nodded frantically, his heart pounding. He didn't understand. He didn't understand any of this, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. The Don dismissed him with a wave, and Tony escorted him back to the door. As Vinnie walked back to his Cadillac, his legs shaking, he looked back at the mansion. In one of the upper windows he saw a shadow move, a figure watching him, and though he couldn't see her face, he felt her eyes on him, cold and unblinking. The next day, the nieces arrived. Vinnie spent the entire morning cleaning his apartment. It was a pitiful effort. The one-bedroom walk-up had never been much to look at. Peeling wallpaper, water-stained ceiling, a kitchenette with a stove that only worked on 2 burners. The furniture was second-hand, the carpet was threadbare, and no amount of scrubbing could hide the fact that this was the home of a man who had never been important. But he tried. He vacuumed. He dusted. He threw out the empty whiskey bottles and the takeout containers that had been piling up for weeks. He made the bed with the only clean sheets he owned, washed the dishes in the sink, and even bought flowers from the corner store, cheap carnations that were already wilting by the time he got them home. He stood in the middle of the apartment, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face, and realized it didn't matter. Nothing he did would change the fact that this place was a dump. Nothing he did would make him worthy of hosting the Don's nieces. But what choice did he have? The Don had given him an order. You didn't refuse the Don, you didn't question him, you did what you were told, and you prayed that it was enough. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Vinnie's heart leapt into his throat. He wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, ran a hand through what was left of his hair, and opened the door. 2 women stood in the hallway. The first thing Vinnie noticed was how different they were. The older one, Lucia, stood with a kind of posture that commanded attention. She was in her late 20s, tall and elegant, with dark hair pulled back into a severe bun that accentuated the sharp angles of her face. Her eyes were brown, almost black, and they studied Vinnie with the cold precision of a surgeon examining a patient. She wore a black dress that was expensive but modest, and her red lips were set in a line that suggested she did not smile often and never without reason. Behind her stood Isabella. She was younger, perhaps 22 or 23, and where Lucia was sharp and controlled, Isabella was soft and uncertain. She had the same dark hair as her sister, but hers fell in loose waves around her shoulders, framing a face that was pale and delicate, with wide brown eyes that seemed too large for her face. She wore a cream-colored dress with lace at the collar, and she clutched a small suitcase in both hands, as though it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. There was something fragile about her, something haunted. Behind the 2 women stood 2 men in dark suits, enforcers from the Famiglia. They carried the rest of the luggage, their expressions blank, their eyes watchful. They said nothing, just set the suitcases down in the hallway and left without a word. Lucia stepped forward first. "You must be Vincent," she said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of an accent that spoke of old-world elegance. She did not offer her hand. "Yeah," Vinnie stammered. "Yeah, that's me. Vinnie. You can call me Vinnie." Lucia's eyes swept over him, taking in his cheap suit, his nervous smile, the sweat on his forehead. Her expression did not change. "My uncle spoke highly of your hospitality." Vinnie couldn't tell if she was lying. "Please come in," he said, stepping aside. "Make yourselves at home." Lucia entered first, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum. She glanced around the apartment, her gaze lingering on the peeling wallpaper, the sagging couch, the wilting carnations on the kitchen table. She said nothing, but Vinnie could feel her judgment like a weight on his chest. Isabella followed behind her sister, moving slowly, hesitantly, as though she were walking into a crypt. Her eyes darted around the room, and she clutched her suitcase tighter. When she looked at Vinnie, there was something in her gaze, fear, maybe, or pity, that made him feel even smaller than he already did. "This is it," Vinnie said, his voice too loud in the small space. "It's not much, but it's clean. Well, mostly clean. I made up the bed for you 2. I can sleep on the couch. It's no problem." Lucia set her purse down on the kitchen table with a soft thud. "That won't be necessary. Isabella and I will share the bed. You may keep your couch." "Oh, okay, sure, whatever works." An awkward silence settled over the room. Vinnie shifted his weight from foot to foot, unsure of what to do, what to say. He had never been good with women, and these 2 were not just women. They were the Don's nieces. One wrong move, one wrong word, and he was dead. Isabella finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is there a bathroom?" Vinnie pointed down the short hallway. Yeah, it's right there, second door on the left. There's towels and stuff. Isabella nodded and disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. Lucia remained in the kitchen, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Vinnie. She did not sit, she did not relax. She simply stood there, watching him with those cold, unblinking eyes. "So," Vinnie said, desperate to fill the silence, "how long are you two planning to stay?" "As long as my uncle deems necessary." "Right. Of course, makes sense." Another silence. Vinnie rubbed the back of his neck. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Water? I think I have some soda in the fridge." "No, thank you." "Okay, cool. Well, if you need anything, just let me know. I'm here to help, whatever you need." Lucia tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a cat might study a mouse. "My uncle tells me you are a soldier in the Famiglia." "Yeah," Vinnie said, puffing his chest out slightly. "Yeah, I've been with the Don for almost 10 years now. Started at the bottom, you know, but I've been working my way up." "I see." Lucia's expression did not change. "And what do you do for the Famiglia, Vincent?" Vinnie hesitated. The truth was, he didn't do much of anything. He ran errands, delivered messages, stood guard at shipments, the kind of grunt work that nobody else wanted to do. But he wasn't about to admit that to her. "I do a little bit of everything," he said. "You know, whatever needs to be done, the Don trusts me." "Does he?" The question hung in the air like a knife. Vinnie laughed nervously. Yeah, of course he does. I mean, he sent you here, didn't he? That's trust." Lucia's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, he sent us here." Something about the way she said it made Vinnie's stomach twist. Before he could respond, the bedroom door opened, and Isabella emerged. She had taken off her coat, and Vinnie could see how thin she was, how her dress hung loosely on her frame. She looked even more fragile than before, like a porcelain doll that might shatter at the slightest touch. "I'm going to lie down for a bit," Isabella said quietly, not looking at anyone. "Of course," Lucia said. "Rest. We have time." Isabella disappeared back into the bedroom, and the door clicked shut. Lucia turned back to Vinnie. "My sister does not sleep well. She has nightmares." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. She sees things, hears things, whispers in the dark." Lucia's gaze was steady, unblinking. "She has since she was a child. My uncle believes it is a gift. I believe it is a curse." Vinnie didn't know what to say to that. "That sounds rough." "It is." Lucia picked up her purse and moved toward the bedroom. "I will join her. We have had a long journey. Do not disturb us unless it is urgent." "Yeah, no problem. I'll just be out here if you need anything." Lucia paused at the bedroom door and looked back at him. "Vincent, yeah? My uncle is a generous man, but his generosity always comes with a price. I hope you understand that." Vinnie swallowed hard. "Yeah, I understand." Lucia nodded once, then disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Vinnie stood alone in the kitchen, his heart pounding, his mind racing. What the hell was going on? Why had the Don sent his nieces here? What was the price Lucia was talking about, and what was wrong with Isabella? He thought about the $20,000, about the Cadillac parked outside, about the way the Don had smiled at him in the mansion. A forgiving man, he had said. But Vinnie was beginning to realize that forgiveness from Don Salvatore Moretti was not a gift. It was a noose, tightening slowly around his neck. The first 2 days passed in uncomfortable silence. Lucia and Isabella kept mostly to the bedroom, emerging only for meals or to use the bathroom. Vinnie tried to be a good host, cooking what little he knew how to cook, pasta mostly, with sauce from a jar, and making sure they had everything they needed. But the apartment felt smaller with them there, the air thick with unspoken tension. Lucia remained cold and distant, speaking only when necessary, her eyes always watching, always calculating. Vinnie got the sense that she was measuring him, weighing him, waiting for something. Isabella was even more unsettling. She barely spoke at all. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, her footsteps silent, her gaze unfocused. At night, Vinnie could hear her through the thin walls, whispering to herself in the dark, her voice low and urgent, as though she were having a conversation with someone who wasn't there. On the third night, Vinnie woke to the sound of crying. He sat up on the couch, disoriented, his heart pounding. The apartment was dark, illuminated only by the pale glow of the streetlights outside. The sound was coming from the bedroom, soft, muffled sobs that sent a chill down his spine. He hesitated, then got up and crept toward the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, and through the gap he could see Isabella sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Lucia stood beside her, one hand resting gently on her sister's back, whispering something Vinnie couldn't hear. "I saw him again," Isabella sobbed. "He was standing at the end of the bed, watching me. He was covered in blood, Lucia. His suit was soaked with it." "Hush," Lucia said softly. "It was just a dream." "It wasn't a dream," Isabella insisted, her voice rising. "He's dead, Lucia. He's dead, and it's because of us. Quiet." Lucia's voice was sharp now, commanding. "You will wake our host." Isabella fell silent, her sobs subsiding into quiet whimpers. Vinnie backed away from the door, his pulse racing. Who was dead? What were they talking about? He returned to the couch, pulled the thin blanket over himself and stared at the ceiling, his mind spinning. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Lucia emerged from the bedroom alone. She looked as composed as ever, her hair perfect, her dress immaculate, as though the events of the night before had never happened. "Good morning, Vincent," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the pot Vinnie had made. "Morning," Vinnie said. He hesitated, then added, "Is Isabella okay? I heard her last night. She sounded upset." Lucia took a sip of her coffee, her expression unreadable. "My sister has a difficult relationship with sleep. It is nothing you need to concern yourself with." "Right, okay." Lucia set her cup down and fixed him with that cold, penetrating gaze. "Tell me, Vincent, do you believe in ghosts?" The question caught him off guard. "Ghosts? I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it. My sister does. She believes the dead do not rest. She believes they linger, watching us, waiting for justice." Lucia's lips curved into that faint, humorless smile. "Do you think she is right?" Vinnie shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Maybe. I guess anything's possible." "Yes," Lucia said softly. "Anything is possible." She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup in the sink, and returned to the bedroom without another word. Vinnie sat at the kitchen table, his hands trembling, and wondered what the hell he had gotten himself into. That evening there was a knock on the door. Vinnie opened it to find Tony Barese standing in the hallway, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Tony," Vinnie said, forcing a smile, "what are you doing here?" "The Don sent me to check on you," Tony said, "to see how things are going with the girls." "Oh, yeah, they're fine. Everything's fine." Tony stepped into the apartment without being invited, his eyes sweeping over the space. "Where are they?" "In the bedroom, resting." Tony nodded. He walked to the bedroom door and knocked softly. "Lucia." "It's Tony." The door opened, and Lucia appeared, her face calm, composed. "Tony, it's good to see you." "You too, kid." Tony glanced past her into the room. "How's your sister?" "She's managing." Tony nodded again, then turned to Vinnie. "The Don wants to see you tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." Vinnie's blood ran cold. "Tomorrow? Why? What does he want?" Tony's expression didn't change. "He doesn't explain himself, Vinnie. He just wants to see you." And with that, Tony left. Vinnie stood in the middle of the apartment, his heart hammering in his chest, and realized with absolute certainty that he was running out of time. Vinnie didn't sleep that night either. He lay on the couch, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as cars passed on the street below. His mind raced through every possibility, every scenario, each one worse than the last. The Don wanted to see him again. That couldn't be good. Nothing good ever came from a second summons. Maybe the forgiveness had been a lie. Maybe the Don had been playing with him all along, letting him think he was safe before springing the trap. Or maybe something had happened with the nieces, something Vinnie didn't even know about, and now he was going to pay for it. He thought about running. He still had the Cadillac, still had a few $1,000s left from the 20 grand he'd stolen. He could drive south, cross the border into Mexico, disappear into some small village where the Famiglia would never find him. But even as he thought it, he knew it was impossible. The Moretti Famiglia had eyes everywhere. They had connections that stretched across continents. If the Don wanted you dead, geography didn't matter. You could run to the ends of the earth, and they would still find you. And when they did, the punishment would be worse for having tried. No, running wasn't an option. All Vinnie could do was show up, face whatever was coming, and hope that somehow he would survive. The next morning, Lucia emerged from the bedroom earlier than usual. She was already dressed, her hair pinned back, her face made up with the kind of precision that suggested she had been awake for hours. She moved through the apartment with quiet efficiency, making coffee, toasting bread, acting as though this were her home, and Vinnie were the guest. Isabella followed a few minutes later, looking even more exhausted than before. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her skin had taken on an almost translucent quality, as though she were fading away. She sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at her hands, while Lucia placed a cup of tea in front of her. "Drink," Lucia said gently. "You need your strength." Isabella picked up the cup with trembling fingers and took a small sip. Vinnie watched them from the couch, unsure of whether he should say something, unsure of what there was to say. The apartment felt like a tomb, heavy with secrets and unspoken dread. Finally, he cleared his throat. I have to go see the Don tonight. He wants to meet with me." Lucia looked up from her coffee, her expression neutral. "I know." "You know? Tony told me yesterday, before he left." Vinnie blinked. "Oh, right, of course. Do you know why the Don wants to see you?" Lucia asked, her gaze steady. "No, Tony didn't say. And you're afraid." It wasn't a question. Vinnie tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out hollow. "I'm not afraid. I just, I want to make sure everything's okay, that I haven't done anything wrong." Lucia set her cup down and leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Do you think you've done something wrong, Vincent?" The question hung in the air like a noose. "No," Vinnie said quickly. "No, I haven't done anything. I've been a good host, haven't I? I've taken care of you and Isabella. I've done everything the Don asked." "You have," Lucia agreed. "You have been very accommodating." There was something in the way she said it, something that made Vinnie's skin crawl. Isabella spoke then, her voice soft and distant. "He's going to ask you about the Cadillac." Vinnie's blood turned to ice. "What?" Isabella didn't look up. Her eyes remained fixed on her tea, as though she were speaking to the cup rather than to him. "The black Cadillac. He's going to ask you where the money came from. And when you lie, he's going to know." "Isabella," Lucia said sharply. "That's enough." But Isabella continued, her voice taking on a strange, hollow quality. "He knows everything, Vincent. He's always known. The money, the car, the lies you tell yourself at night. He knows." Vinnie felt his chest tighten. "I didn't lie. I told the Don the truth. I've been saving up." "Stop!" Lucia's voice cut through the air like a blade. She stood, moving to her sister's side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Isabella, you need to rest. Come." Isabella allowed herself to be led back to the bedroom, her movements slow and mechanical, like a puppet being guided by invisible strings. Before the door closed, she looked back at Vinnie one last time, and her eyes were filled with something that looked like pity. The door clicked shut. Vinnie sat alone in the kitchen, his hands shaking, his mind reeling. How did Isabella know about the Cadillac? How did she know about the lies he told himself? It was like she could see inside his head, like she knew things she shouldn't be able to know. He thought about what Lucia had said the first night. She sees things, hears things, whispers in the dark. Vinnie didn't believe in ghosts or curses or any of that superstitious nonsense. But sitting there in that silent apartment, with the weight of Isabella's words pressing down on him, he wasn't so sure anymore. The hours crawled by. Vinnie tried to distract himself. He turned on the television, flipped through channels without really watching anything. He paced the apartment, smoked half a pack of cigarettes, drank coffee until his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He thought about calling someone, anyone, just to hear another voice, but who would he call? He had no friends, no family, just the Famiglia, and they were the ones he was terrified of. At 7 o'clock he showered and put on his best suit. It was the same cheap, ill-fitting thing he always wore, but he tried to make it look presentable. He slicked back his hair, splashed on cologne, checked himself in the mirror. He looked like a man going to his own funeral. At 7:30, he knocked on the bedroom door. "I'm heading out. I'll be back later tonight." There was no response. He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything, just, help yourselves. I'll see you later." Still nothing. Vinnie left the apartment, descended the stairs, and stepped out into the cool evening air. The Cadillac sat at the curb, gleaming under the streetlights, beautiful and damning all at once. He climbed in, started the engine, and drove toward the Don's estate, his heart pounding with every mile. The gates opened as he approached, just as they had before. The driveway stretched ahead of him, lined with trees whose branches seemed to reach toward the car like skeletal fingers. The mansion loomed in the distance, its windows glowing with warm light, inviting and ominous. Vinnie parked in front of the entrance and sat for a moment gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady his breathing. He thought about driving away, about flooring the gas and never looking back, but his body wouldn't obey. Fear had him paralyzed. Finally, he forced himself to get out of the car and walk to the door. It opened before he could knock. Tony Barese stood in the doorway, dressed as impeccably as ever. "Vinnie, come in." Vinnie stepped inside, and the door closed behind him with a heavy thud that sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. Tony led him through the mansion, past the same hallways and paintings he'd seen before, but this time they didn't go to the dining room. Instead, Tony took him deeper into the house, down a corridor Vinnie hadn't seen, until they reached a heavy wooden door. Tony knocked twice, then opened it. "The Don will see you now." Vinnie stepped inside. The room was smaller than the dining room, more intimate. It was a study lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. A fireplace crackled in the corner, casting dancing shadows across the walls. In the center of the room, behind a massive mahogany desk, sat Don Salvatore Moretti. He was reading a book, his silver-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, and he didn't look up when Vinnie entered. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and the soft turning of a page. Finally, the Don closed the book and removed his glasses, setting them on the desk with deliberate care. He looked up at Vinnie, and those cold, winter-blue eyes seemed to see straight through him. "Vincent," the Don said. "Sit." Vinnie sat in the chair across from the desk, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The Don leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "How are my nieces?" "They're good, Don. I've been taking care of them, making sure they have everything they need." "Good." The Don nodded slowly. "And Lucia? She has been treating you well?" "Yes, Don. She's been very respectful." "And Isabella?" Vinnie hesitated. She's been quiet. She doesn't say much, but she seems okay." The Don's expression didn't change. "Isabella is special. She has a gift, you see. She can sense things that others cannot. The dead speak to her, Vincent. They tell her secrets." Vinnie swallowed hard. "I didn't know that, Don." "No, of course you didn't." The Don rose from his chair and walked to the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Tell me, Vincent, have you ever wondered why I chose to forgive you?" Here it was, the question Vinnie had been dreading. "I'm grateful, Don. I know I made a mistake and I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." The Don turned to face him, the firelight casting shadows across his features. "You misunderstand me. I did not forgive you out of mercy. I forgave you because I wanted to see what you would do." Vinnie's mouth went dry. "I don't understand. You stole from me, Vincent. $20,000. You thought you were clever. You thought you could take what was mine and build yourself a new life with it. You bought that ridiculous car, paraded it around the city like a peacock, all the while thinking you had gotten away with something." The Don's voice remained calm, almost conversational, but there was a weight to his words that made Vinnie feel like he was sinking into the floor. "I could have killed you," the Don continued. "It would have been simple. A bullet, a river, a message to the others. But that would have been too easy, too quick. You see, Vincent, I don't just punish betrayal, I teach lessons. And the lesson I wanted to teach required patience." Vinnie's hands were shaking. "Don, I swear, I'll pay back every cent. I'll work for free. I'll do anything." The Don raised a hand and Vinnie fell silent. "The money is not important. Money comes and goes. What matters is loyalty. What matters is understanding that in this life, in this familia, there are no second chances. There is only justice." The Don moved closer, standing directly in front of Vinnie now, looking down at him with those cold, unblinking eyes. "I sent my nieces to you for a reason. Lucia is there to watch you, to measure you, to see if you are worth salvaging. And Isabella, she is there to see the truth. She will know if you are lying. She will know if you are planning to betray me again." Vinnie's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might burst. "I'm not, Don. I swear, I'm not." "Good." The Don placed a hand on Vinnie's shoulder and Vinnie flinched. "Because if I find out that you have lied to me, if I find out that you are not the loyal soldier you claim to be, then Lucia will do what needs to be done. Do you understand?" Vinnie's throat was so tight he could barely speak. "Yes, Don, I understand." "Excellent." The Don released his shoulder and returned to his desk. "You may go." Vinnie stood on shaking legs, turned toward the door, then hesitated. "Don, can I ask you something?" The Don looked up, his expression unreadable. "You may ask. Why the nieces? Why not just send one of your enforcers? Why make them stay with me?" The Don smiled, and it was the coldest smile Vinnie had ever seen. "Because, Vincent, I wanted you to feel what it's like to live with death in your home, to wake up every morning not knowing if this is the day it finally comes for you. Lucia and Isabella are not just guests. They are your judgment, and when the time comes, they will be your executioners." Vinnie felt the blood drain from his face. "Now go," the Don said, And remember, Vincent, I am always watching. Vinnie stumbled out of the room, down the hallway, out of the mansion. He barely remembered getting into the Cadillac, barely remembered starting the engine. He drove back to the apartment in a daze, his mind numb, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. When he finally pulled up to his building, he sat in the car for a long time staring up at the lit window of his apartment. Somewhere up there, behind that glass, Lucia and Isabella were waiting, watching, measuring. Vinnie climbed out of the car and walked toward the building, each step feeling like he was walking toward his own grave. When Vinnie returned to the apartment, the lights were off. He stood in the doorway, his hand on the knob, listening. The silence was absolute, suffocating. No voices, no movement, nothing. For a moment he wondered if they had left, if the Don had recalled them and spared him this slow, agonizing death. But then he saw their shoes by the door, Lucia's elegant heels and Isabella's worn flats, and he knew they were still here, waiting. He stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he could make out the shapes of furniture, the outline of the kitchenette, the closed bedroom door. He considered turning on a light, but something stopped him. The darkness felt safer somehow, like a blanket he could hide under. He moved to the couch and sat down heavily, his body exhausted, his mind racing. The Don's words echoed in his head, over and over, like a curse he couldn't shake. They are your judgment. And when the time comes, they will be your executioners. Vinnie put his face in his hands and tried to breathe. He thought about the Cadillac sitting outside, gleaming and beautiful and utterly worthless now. He thought about the $20,000, about how stupid he'd been to think he could get away with it. He thought about his entire pathetic life, all 38 years of it, and realized that it had led him here, to this moment, to this apartment, to this slow death. He didn't know how long he sat there in the dark. Minutes, maybe hours. Time had lost all meaning. And then the bedroom door opened. Lucia emerged, a silhouette against the faint light from the street. She moved silently across the room and stopped a few feet away from him. Her arms crossed, her face hidden in shadow. "You're back," she said. "Yeah." Vinnie's voice was hoarse. "I'm back. How was your meeting with my uncle?" "It was fine." "You're lying." Vinnie looked up at her, but he couldn't see her eyes. "What do you want me to say, Lucia? That he scared the hell out of me? That he basically told me you and Isabella are here to kill me? Is that what you want to hear?" Lucia didn't respond immediately. She moved to the window and looked out at the street below, her posture rigid, controlled. "My uncle is a complicated man. He does not do anything without reason." "Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out." "He wants you to understand something, Vincent. He wants you to feel what it means to betray him. Not just to die for it, but to live with it. To wake up every day knowing that your time is borrowed, that your life is no longer your own." Vinnie laughed bitterly. "Well, mission accomplished. I'm terrified. I can barely sleep. I can barely breathe. Is that enough? Can I go now?" Lucia turned to face him. "You can never go, Vincent. Not until my uncle says so." "And when will that be?" "When he's satisfied that you've learned your lesson, or when he decides you haven't." "And then what? You kill me?" Lucia didn't answer, which was answer enough. Vinnie leaned back on the couch and closed his eyes. "Why are you telling me this? Why not just do it and get it over with?" "Because," Lucia said quietly, "I want you to understand that I am not cruel. I do not take pleasure in this. I am simply loyal. My uncle gave me a task, and I will see it through. But I am not a monster, Vincent. I am a soldier, just like you. We're nothing alike." "No?" Lucia moved closer, her voice soft but firm. "We are both bound to the Famiglia. We both do what we're told, even when it costs us. The only difference is that I am good at it, and you are not." Vinnie opened his eyes and looked at her. In the dim light, he could just make out her features, the sharp lines of her face, the cold determination in her eyes. She was beautiful, he realized, in the way a knife was beautiful, elegant and deadly. "What about Isabella?" Vinnie asked. "Is she a soldier too?" Lucia's expression softened, just slightly. "Isabella is different. She is not like us. She does not belong in this world." "Then why is she here?" "Because my uncle believes she has a purpose. He believes her gift is meant to serve the Famiglia, but I think he is wrong. I think her gift is killing her." Vinnie frowned. "What do you mean?" Lucia turned back to the window. "Isabella has always been sensitive. Even as a child she would see things, hear things that no one else could. At first we thought she was just imaginative, that she would grow out of it, but it only got worse. She started having visions, dreams of people who had died, of things that hadn't happened yet. My uncle believed it was a blessing, a sign that she was special, but I watched her suffer. I watched her waste away, haunted by voices she couldn't silence. And your uncle still sent her here? He believes she can help reveal the truth about you, that she can see whether you are truly repentant or simply afraid. Lucia's voice was laced with bitterness. But I think he sent her here to punish me as much as to punish you. Vinnie sat up. Punish you? For what? Lucia didn't answer immediately. She was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, more vulnerable than Vinnie had ever heard it. Because I questioned him. A year ago, there was a man, a capo, who my uncle ordered me to kill. He said the man was a traitor, that he had been skimming money, planning to betray the Famiglia. But I knew this man. He was loyal. He had a family, children. I didn't believe he was guilty. What did you do? I followed orders. I killed him. Lucia's hands clenched at her sides. But afterward I learned the truth. He wasn't a traitor. He was innocent. My uncle had him killed because he knew too much about a deal that had gone wrong, a deal that could have exposed my uncle to the other families. It was easier to eliminate him than to take the risk. Vinnie stared at her. And you told the Don you knew? I confronted him. I demanded to know why he had lied to me. And do you know what he said? Lucia's voice trembled with suppressed anger. He said that loyalty means trusting him without question. That doubt is the same as betrayal. And then he sent Isabella and me here, to this place, to watch over you, to remind me of my place. Vinnie didn't know what to say. For the first time since Lucia and Isabella had arrived, he saw her not as the Don's cold, calculating enforcer, but as a woman trapped in the same nightmare he was. I'm sorry, he said finally. Lucia shook her head. Don't be. I made my choice. I chose loyalty over doubt. And now, I'm paying for it. She moved toward the bedroom, then paused at the door. Get some sleep, Vincent. You'll need your strength. For what? Lucia looked back at him, and in the darkness he couldn't read her expression. For what's coming? She disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Vinnie sat alone in the dark, his mind churning. He thought about what Lucia had said, about loyalty and doubt, about the Don's cruelty, about the innocent man she had killed. He thought about his own betrayal, about the $20,000, about how all of this had started with his greed and stupidity, and he wondered if there was any way out, or if he was already dead and just didn't know it yet. The next few days were strange. Lucia remained distant, but there was a shift in her demeanor, a crack in the armor she had worn so carefully. She spoke to Vinnie more, asked him questions about his life, his family, the choices that had led him to the Famiglia. It wasn't kindness exactly, but it wasn't cruelty either. It was something closer to curiosity, as though she were trying to understand how someone could be so weak, so foolish. Isabella, on the other hand, grew worse. She stopped eating. Lucia would prepare meals, set plates in front of her, but Isabella would just stare at the food as though it were poison. She grew thinner, paler, her eyes hollow and glassy. She spent most of her time in the bedroom, and when she did emerge, she moved like a sleepwalker, her gaze fixed on something only she could see. At night, Vinnie could hear her whispering again, her voice rising and falling in a rhythm that sounded almost like a prayer. Sometimes she would cry out, sudden sharp gasps that woke him from uneasy sleep. And once, in the dead of night, he heard her laughing, a low, eerie sound that made his skin crawl. What's wrong with her? Vinnie asked Lucia one morning, after Isabella had gone back to bed without touching her breakfast. Lucia looked at her sister's untouched plate, her expression unreadable. She's dying. Vinnie blinked. What? Not physically. Not yet. But the visions are consuming her. She told me last night that she can't tell the difference anymore between the living and the dead. She sees them everywhere, standing in corners, sitting at the table, lying in the bed beside her. She says they're waiting for something. Waiting for what? Lucia met his eyes. For you. A chill ran down Vinnie's spine. What does that mean? It means that whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen soon. Isabella can feel it. She's always been able to sense death before it arrives. And right now she's drowning in it. Vinnie felt his stomach twist. Is she saying I'm going to die? She's saying someone is. Lucia stood and carried Isabella's plate to the sink. And I think we both know who it's going to be. That night, Vinnie couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of sirens, the soft murmur of Isabella's voice drifting through the walls. He thought about running again, about getting in the Cadillac and driving until the gas ran out, but he knew it was pointless. The Don would find him. Lucia would find him. There was no escape. He must have dozed off at some point because he woke to the sound of the bedroom door opening. He sat up disoriented, his heart pounding. The apartment was dark, but he could see Isabella standing in the doorway, her nightgown pale in the shadows, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stood completely still, staring at him with those wide, hollow eyes. "Isabella," Vinnie whispered. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. She just stood there, watching him, and then she spoke, her voice soft and distant, as though it were coming from very far away. "He's here." Vinnie's blood ran cold. "Who's here?" "The man you killed." Vinnie's breath caught in his throat. "I didn't kill anyone." "Not you," Isabella said. "Lucia, the capo, the innocent man. He's here. He's been here since we arrived. He follows her everywhere. He's standing behind her right now." Vinnie looked toward the bedroom door, but there was nothing there, just darkness. "Isabella, you need to go back to bed. You're having a nightmare." "It's not a nightmare." Isabella took a step forward, her movement slow and mechanical. He wants her to know that he forgives her, that it wasn't her fault, but he also wants her to know that the Don will pay, that blood demands blood, that the wheel always turns. Vinnie stood, his hands trembling. "Isabella, please, you're scaring me." "You should be scared, Vincent." Isabella's gaze shifted, locking onto him with sudden, terrible clarity. "Because you're next. I can see it. I can see the way you die. I can see the wine, the cup, the poison. I can see Lucia's hand shaking as she pours it. I can see you drinking, trusting, and then the pain, the realization, the betrayal." Vinnie's legs felt weak. "What are you talking about?" "The Don has given the order. Tomorrow night there will be a feast, just the three of us. Lucia will cook, and she will serve you wine. And in that wine there will be poison. And you will die, Vincent. You will die the way all traitors die, slowly, painfully, alone." Before Vinnie could respond, Lucia appeared in the doorway behind Isabella, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. "Isabella," she said sharply. "Stop." But Isabella continued, her voice rising, trembling with emotion. "He needs to know, Lucia. He needs to know what you're going to do. He needs to have a choice." "He doesn't have a choice," Lucia said, her voice hard. "None of us do." Isabella turned to her sister, tears streaming down her face. "Then we're all damned, all of us, the Don, you, me, Vincent, we're all damned." She collapsed then, her legs giving out, and Lucia rushed forward to catch her. She lowered her sister gently to the floor, cradling her head, whispering something Vinnie couldn't hear. Vinnie stood frozen, his mind reeling. Poison. A feast. Tomorrow night. The words echoed in his head, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that Isabella was telling the truth. Lucia looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw something he hadn't seen before. Regret. "I'm sorry, Vincent," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry." And Vinnie knew that tomorrow night he would die. Vinnie didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat on the couch, watching the sky slowly lighten through the window, listening to the muffled sounds of Lucia tending to Isabella in the bedroom. He thought about running. He thought about fighting. He thought about calling the police, begging for protection, confessing everything. But every option led to the same conclusion: death. If he ran, the Famiglia would hunt him down. If he fought, he would lose. If he went to the police, he would be a dead man the moment he stepped outside the station. There was no way out. There never had been. The only question now was how he would face it. As dawn broke, Lucia emerged from the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. She looked exhausted, her face drawn, her hair falling loose from its usual severe bun. She moved to the kitchen and began making coffee, her movements automatic, mechanical. Vinnie watched her for a long moment before speaking. "Is she okay?" Lucia didn't look up. "She's sleeping, finally. What she said last night was true." Lucia poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to Vinnie, setting it on the table in front of him. "Every word of it." Vinnie stared at the cup. "So tonight you're going to poison me?" "Yes." The word hung in the air between them, simple and absolute. Vinnie picked up the coffee, but his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't bring it to his lips. He set it back down. "Why are you telling me this? Why not just do it? Why give me the chance to run?" Lucia sat down across from him, her own coffee untouched. "Because I'm tired of lies. I'm tired of pretending that what we do is just, that the Don's word is law, that loyalty means blind obedience. I've killed for him, I've lied for him, I've sacrificed everything for him. And for what? So he can use me as his instrument of vengeance. So he can punish the weak and the foolish while he sits in his mansion playing God." Her voice was bitter, filled with a rage that Vinnie had never heard before. "I don't want to kill you, Vincent," she continued. "You're pathetic and greedy and stupid, but you don't deserve this. No one deserves this. But if I don't follow through, if I betray my uncle's orders, then Isabella and I are both dead. He'll have us killed, and it won't be quick. It won't be merciful. He'll make an example of us, just like he's making an example of you." Vinnie felt something twist in his chest. Not pity exactly, but understanding. They were both trapped in the same web, both puppets dancing on the Don's strings. The only difference was that Lucia had known it all along, and Vinnie was only just beginning to see it. "So, what do we do?" Vinnie asked. Lucia met his eyes. "I don't know." They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the coming night pressing down on them like a stone. Finally, Vinnie spoke. "What if we didn't go through with it?" Lucia frowned. "What do you mean? What if we faked it? What if we made it look like I died but I didn't? What if I disappeared and you told the Don it was done?" Lucia shook her head. "It wouldn't work. My uncle will want proof. He'll want to see the body. And even if we convinced him, even if we managed to pull it off, he would know eventually. He always knows. Then what if we told him the truth? The truth? That you refused. That you couldn't do it. That you're done being his executioner." Lucia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And then what, Vincent? We both die. Isabella dies. Is that your plan?" "Maybe," Vinnie said quietly. "Maybe it's better than living like this. Better than being his puppet. Better than killing and lying and betraying until there's nothing left of us but blood and guilt." Lucia stared at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Vinnie saw something in her eyes that looked like hope. Fragile, desperate hope. "You're right," she said softly. "It would be better, but I can't let Isabella die for my choices. She's innocent. She doesn't deserve to be punished for my failures." "Then we get her out," Vinnie said. "We get her somewhere safe, somewhere the Don can't reach her. And then we face him. Together." Lucia was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant, calculating. Finally she nodded. "There's a place, a convent, about 3 hours north of here. The Mother Superior is an old friend of my mother's. She doesn't ask questions. Isabella would be safe there. Then we take her there today, right now, before tonight." Lucia hesitated, then stood. "I'll wake her. Pack only what we need. We leave in 20 minutes. Within the hour they were on the road. Isabella sat in the back seat of the Cadillac, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes closed. She hadn't said a word since Lucia had woken her, hadn't asked where they were going or why. She simply allowed herself to be led, as though she had already surrendered to whatever fate awaited her. Vinnie drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Lucia sat in the passenger seat staring out the window at the passing landscape. The city gave way to suburbs, then to farmland, then to rolling hills dotted with trees. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the day grew warm. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. After 3 hours, they arrived at the convent. It was a small stone building nestled in a valley, surrounded by gardens and a low stone wall. A bell tower rose from the center, and a wooden cross stood at the entrance. Lucia helped Isabella out of the car, and together they walked to the door. Vinnie waited by the Cadillac, watching as Lucia knocked and spoke to the woman who answered. He couldn't hear what was said, but he saw Lucia embrace her sister one last time, saw Isabella nod and disappear inside. When Lucia returned to the car, her eyes were wet, but her face was calm. "She'll be safe there," Lucia said. "They'll take care of her." Vinnie nodded. "Good." They climbed back into the car and Vinnie started the engine, but instead of heading back toward the city, he turned onto a different road, one that led deeper into the countryside. "Where are we going?" Lucia asked. "To see the Don," Vinnie said. "To end this." Lucia didn't argue. They arrived at the Don's estate just after sunset. The gates opened as they approached, and Vinnie drove up the long driveway, his heart pounding. He parked in front of the mansion, and together he and Lucia walked to the door. Tony Barese answered, his expression unreadable. "The Don wasn't expecting you until later." "Tell him we're here," Lucia said. "Tell him we need to speak with him, now." Tony hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." A few minutes later, Tony returned. "The Don will see you in his study." They followed him through the mansion, down the familiar corridors, to the heavy wooden door. Tony knocked, then opened it. Don Salvatore Moretti sat behind his desk, a glass of wine in his hand, his expression calm. "Lucia, Vincent, this is unexpected." Lucia stepped forward, her posture straight, her voice steady. "Uncle, I cannot do what you've asked of me. The Don's eyes narrowed. And why is that? Because it's wrong. Because Vincent doesn't deserve to die. Because I'm tired of being your instrument of death. Because I'm done. The room fell silent. The Don set his wineglass down slowly, his gaze never leaving Lucia's face. You're done. Yes. And you, Vincent. The Don's gaze shifted to Vinnie. Are you done as well? Vinnie swallowed hard. Yeah, I'm done. I stole from you. And I'm sorry. I'll pay you back every cent. But I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to kill me. If you want me dead, you'll have to do it yourself. The Don leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. For a long moment, he said nothing. And then, to Vinnie's shock, he smiled. Interesting, the Don said. Very interesting. Lucia frowned. Uncle? The Don stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Do you know why I sent you to Vincent, Lucia? Why I gave you this task? To punish me. To punish him. No, the Don said. To test you. To see if you would follow my orders blindly, or if you would finally find the courage to stand up to me. Lucia stared at him, her mouth opening slightly. What? The Don turned to face them. You have been my most loyal soldier, Lucia, but loyalty without conscience is not loyalty. It is slavery. I needed to know if you were capable of thinking for yourself, of making your own choices, even when those choices defied me. So this was all a test, Vinnie said, his voice rising. You were going to let her kill me just to see if she would refuse. No, the Don said calmly. I was going to let her try, and then I was going to stop her. But it seems that won't be necessary. Lucia's hands clenched into fists. You used us. You used Isabella. You made her suffer, made her think she was going insane, all for some twisted lesson. The Don's expression hardened. I did what was necessary. Isabella's gift is real, but it is also dangerous. She needed to be removed from this life before it consumed her. And you, Lucia, needed to learn that loyalty means knowing when to say no. And what about me? Vinnie demanded. What about the $20,000? What about the Cadillac? The Don looked at him, and for the first time there was something almost like approval in his eyes. You stole from me, Vincent. That is unforgivable, but you also faced your death with more courage than I expected. You didn't run, you didn't beg. You came here ready to face the consequences. That is worth something. So what now? Vinnie asked. Are you going to kill me or not? The Don picked up his wineglass and took a sip. No, Vincent, I'm not going to kill you. But you are no longer part of this Famiglia. You are free. Take your ridiculous car and leave this city. If I ever see you again, I will not be so forgiving. Vinnie stared at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. That's it? I just walk away? That's it. Vinnie looked at Lucia, who was still standing rigid, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and relief. She nodded once, and Vinnie turned and walked out of the study, out of the mansion into the cool night air. He climbed into the Cadillac, started the engine, and drove away from the estate, away from the city, away from the Famiglia. He didn't know where he was going, he didn't care, he was alive, he was free, and that was enough. Lucia stood in the Don's study, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. What about me, uncle? Am I free as well? The Don looked at her, and his expression softened just slightly. You have always been free, Lucia. You just never believed it. Go to your sister. Take care of her. Live your life. You have earned it. Lucia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. She turned and left the study, left the mansion, left the Famiglia behind. And as she drove north toward the convent, toward Isabella, she felt the weight of years of blood and guilt lift from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, Lucia was free. 3 months later, Vinnie sat at a small cafe in a coastal town in Mexico, sipping coffee and watching the waves roll in. The Cadillac was parked nearby, a little dusty but still beautiful. He had sold most of his possessions, paid back what he could of the money he'd stolen, and started over. It wasn't much. He worked odd jobs, lived in a small apartment above a bakery kept to himself, but it was his. No one was watching him. No one was waiting to kill him. He was just Vincent Calabrese, a man with a past he didn't talk about and a future he was still figuring out. He thought about Lucia sometimes, wondered if she was happy, if Isabella had recovered, if they had found peace. He hoped so. They deserved it. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Vinnie raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to second chances, to freedom, to surviving the Don's final test, and to never, ever looking back.